time with this, because I think, as said in our keynote and in the Programmatic session and so forth, is that there's an opportunity for publishers to maximize the data that they have, right? Whether that be internal data, external, whatever. And so to lead this conversation, I'm going to turn things over to Beth from Adomik. Beth, let's all welcome Beth.
I'm going to gracefully get on this chair now.
Yeah, it's like the old Live with Regis and Kelly.
It is.
Sorry, I'm
Kelly.
dating myself. It's Seacrest.
You're Seacrest. Okay, hi. So I'd like to welcome everybody today. I'm Beth from Adomik. I'm a customer success manager over here. And I've got our panel today, and what we're going to be discussing is how publishers are leveraging their data assets to optimize yield. So I'm really honored to have these three great panelists with me today. I have Rachael Savage. She is the Vice President and Global Head of Ad Operations, Programmatic, and Platforms for Condé Nast. Next, I have Jake Sullivan, who is the Director of Programmatic Operations for U.S. News and World Report. And finally, at the end, we've got Gregg Murphy, Vice President of Global Revenue and Operation for the Match Group. So I just want to let you know a little bit about this session. I'm going to basically be throwing questions out to them because you don't want to hear from me as customer success. You want to hear what these publishers have to say and what they're doing to optimize their yield. So right now our topics, we're going to be focusing on challenges that the publishers are facing around monetizing their inventory in the programmatic market. We're going to see how do you choose the best points to generate your yield. How are you leveraging your user experience data to build these tools? What are your yield solutions? And are you using different points of data, third-party data, to detect business opportunities in the market? So we'll go on through these questions. We'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions and answers. And then I do have a quick announcement. I'm going to call up my CEO, and we're going to make a little quick announcement about what's coming on at Adomik. So first, I want to talk about how publishers are leveraging their revenue and technical data to optimize yield. And we know today that optimizing the yield means that you are managing a multiple stack. You've got multiple SSPs, monetization partners, header bidding solutions, and all of this data. You've got data coming in, and what are you going to do with it? How are you going to use all that information to optimize your yield? So Rachael, I'm going to start with you, and I want to know a little bit about what is your management for stack, and how are you building your stack to optimize your yield for your open auctions?
Sure. I think Condé Nast is a portfolio of a number of different brands, everything from Vogue, Wired, GQ, New Yorker, and you can kind of think about the ad sales dynamics for some of those brands are going to be a little different as you look at each title. But it's really important for us to be able to be consistent as possible so that we get that data back. And we're looking at not only SSP performance, but the sales dynamics within the programmatic auctions, and then how we turn around and sort of value advertising as part of our user experience in that process. Thinking about all of the different digital businesses across that portfolio, and how advertising versus subs or affiliate or e-commerce all sort of play into that mix. So I think you can kind of go deep in both directions, but that's sort of top line.
Okay, so Jake, what do you think about that at U.S. News? How are you handling that same topic?
Yeah, we're a different setup. We have kind of one core property where we have different verticals focused on certain endemic areas, travel, health, et cetera. But I think the same idea holds true of wanting to build a resilient stack that is going to be the most effective and the most performative on any given page load. And so we're thinking, for a little background, we have our server-side wrapper for Amazon, we have a client-side pre-bid wrapper, and then we have open bidding running. And we have some duplication of bidders across those pathways intentionally, so we can look at the DSP, their individual performance by wrapper, and DSP performance through a given bidder by wrapper. And then in the case of, for example, Trade Desk, if we want to light up a specific pathway for them, we can take all of that data because we can see it on an apples-to-apples basis across those wrappers and those SSPs and choose where we want to activate it when they come to situations where they're requiring their partners to choose a single pathway for that DSP. So that type of data helps us to optimize.
And Gregg, I know your setup's a little different, but what are your
We're set up a little different. I mean, similarly set up on web. We just have diminishing web inventory at this point. Most of our match group is dating apps, obviously. And we're app heavy. Most of our new users are coming through the app, and we try to keep the app experience really clean and really streamlined and not too many touch points. But for web, we're basically set up the same way. I don't think we're particularly unique in that way. At that point, we're not trying to inundate the user with ads, but like while they're still on desktop, it's not gonna look like Times Square per se, but like we're gonna use this many. I mean, some of them do probably, but I would say also that like there, it's like it's not set and forget it, but it's just like let's squeeze as much as we can out of it. But like I also don't actually care when an SSP comes to us and like hey, we want to do open bidding, we want to do TAM, we want to do pre-bid. It's like if you want to pay for the extra queries per second on the same user, have at it. Like my job is just to take 1 billion impressions and make the most yield. But we then look at our stack, and sometimes we're like, here are these also ran SSPs, and like we have other SSPs reaching out to us, like, hey, we have unique demand. It's like 2022, dude, you don't have unique demand on desktop web, so let's move on. But yeah, we're constantly looking at different ways. But like for our app experience, it's more about what is the easiest way without affecting the other side of the house, which is subscriptions.
Okay. So yeah, so now you've done that, you set that up, you have your stack management ready, and now you're gonna go into the day-to-day. You need to operate, you need to monitor, you need to do all of this for your stack on a daily basis. So I'd like to hear 3 different views again on what kinds of reporting tools are you using, how are you dealing with these complex reports with all these data points coming in, and what do you think, as your very different publishers, what kind of best practices do you feel works best for your organization? So I'm just going to line again. Rachel, I'll start with you.
Sure. I'm in a global role that's relatively new for Condé Nast, and so one of the things that I'm working with the Adomik team as Adomik customers in Europe is how we really centralize all of our programmatic data with Adomik and have a consistent view across all of these markets that we're sort of operating independently. I think that sort of the ability to measure everything in a consistent way across the board is really important for us. So obviously we're piping the programmatic data in that way. We're using GAM. We have data stores and warehouses to bring both our order management system and programmatic data together. We're bringing in page views and event tracking for the product portfolio to be able to look at revenue analytics by site changes and those kinds of things as well.
Yeah, it's a very familiar refrain for me. I think we're looking at similar with the Adomik initiative, trying to unify our data in that sense. Beyond that, we'll use some platforms like Supermetrics, where that'll be able to automate queries from 2 different data sets and join them. So if we want to look at like impressions per page view, we can have that run overnight, join Google Ad Manager and Google Analytics, and then get some tracking there, which is helpful. But one other thing we'll think about is the data that comes in, being mindful of it, reporting on it, but also the data we're sending out and us being able to curate it and maximize the performance for our partners with that. I think about that in the context of viewability, among other things. So one of the things we'll look at is for some of our lowest performing partners in our stack, we'll test curating the viewability signals we'll send to them. So we'll cut out some of the least performing, the least viewable inventory. And we've done this test in a couple cases, and in some cases, depending on the bidder, that can be a nice performance uptick, and they start to recognize the domain as almost a new site, and they kind of bump their position up in the stack and become more valuable in that way. So data in, being mindful of all those signals and reporting and baking that into our processes, but also taking all that insight and bringing it to bear in the data signals we send out, especially in the viewability context.
Yeah, I mean, this may come as a surprise to the audience, but also an Adomik client here. So we do use, obviously it's actually pretty great. It has, rather than have, your random direct seller ask, like, how much did buyer A spend the open auction in, Indonesia on Thursday? We can just look it up right in Adomik, so it's great. But also we have the challenge of marrying, like we have multiple apps and marrying user behavior data with all of our monetization data. Like if we introduce a new ad unit or a new ad format, or we increase the cadence, we want to make sure that we're not upsetting the other side of the house and like, okay, now that we're showing more ads to this type of user, their messaging behavior went down X%. So that becomes a challenge, but that's not necessarily a challenge for other pubs. But it's similarly a challenge. So like, hey, if people are coming to making this up, Jake, but all of a sudden time spent on US News and World Report dove because you had you had an expandable or something. I'm not saying you're doing that.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Right, but it's the same thing. Like that's still always going to be somewhat of a challenge. But pulling at least all of your monetization data in the same place for all your channels makes your life a lot easier to actually have actionable insights. So.
Okay, thank you. So next, we know that another topic that is always affecting our publishers' yield is your UX. So you can leverage, what's going on in your user experience, how you can get that data in to optimize your yield. I mean, you guys know what happens, the negative impact on your ads, on your user experience. It's that like catch-22. Like, I want to put my ads out there so I still get my revenue, but then I have my ads running and it might cause latency, and now I'm in this big circle and I'm not quite sure what to do. So, Jake, I'm going to start with you. Just how are you handling that in your organization? How do you manage that advertising to get revenue plus the user experience balance on your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, I think user experience is the first thing. It's the most important thing, and everything flows from that. And we're always going to make decisions with that as the first and foremost priority. So, and I think it's a virtuous cycle when you have positive user experience, and we've seen this with our users who are more engaged with our brand, from our non-registered to registered to subscribers. The engagement goes up substantially, something like 50% higher session depth for registered and 120%, a bit more actually, for subscribers in terms of the session depth. So when you have people who are engaged, they have a good user experience, they want to deepen that relationship, more ad revenue comes as a result, or more revenue in general. So, we're constantly mindful of that. We're looking at core web vital signals, of course, to make sure from that side everything is performative and our users are getting a good experience. But then also we're doing some things with our DMP where we're connecting back to some on-site A/B testing content to say, for segments who we had historically used for advertising purposes, let's test showing them different content experiences and kind of close the loop there and improve the experience, or work to improve the experience that way. And it's been successful. I think it's all connected. It all starts with UX.
Greg, I'll move to you next.
Yeah, so again, like I've said this before, but we're an ancillary revenue stream compared to the other side of the house in subscriptions. So we're basically referees in a football game. Nobody notices us until we screw up. So like, we want to be really protective of the user experience for obvious reasons. And so we are constantly testing things. The other thing that I kind of preach patience to the site teams and the app teams is like, of course when you introduce a new ad, it's going to upset the ecosystem a little bit and people are going to complain, but then people just get used to the ads. Like, I know I personally like ads when I get a playable for like a game, but like I'm totally rare. But it's preaching patience and having like set guidelines around like, here's the testing period, here are the thresholds, let's not shut this down 3 days in just because you saw a little blip. But so it's always just being lockstep with the product and engineering teams, I think.
Rachel, what about Condé Nast?
I feel like I love hearing what these guys say. It makes my eyes cross a little bit, thinking about doing all of this across our brands globally, and how to test. I think that there's this perception that like ads are killing the user experience, but we're talking about, especially in our portfolio, beautiful luxury ads, and we're not putting too many of them on the page. But with the internal conversations around how are we moving brands to paywalls or thinking about other digital business models to sort of diversify the portfolio, it's sort of like we have too many ads, and how do you actually, like, where's the data to find that? Is it an internal conversation of feelings, or do we have actual math? And getting into, I think, a lot of the testing that you guys are describing, and we've started to work towards that, but having the data and everybody's confidence around it, I think, is the first step to getting there, and then being able to look at those trade-offs to make near-term, long-term, and medium-term decisions about what line of business each one of these brands sort of pursues over time.
And Rachel, I know we spoke a little bit about before, like you said, these beautiful ads. Like some of your sites, you said, your readers, your customers who are out there are expecting. If you're on a fashion, site, you want to see that Versace ad, or you want to see that Balenciaga ad. So again, how are you making decisions as to, like you said, you're doing a select number of ads, but you still want those ads, you can raise your yield. How are you making that decision before I'm going to take the Versace or I'm going to take the Balenciaga, and how am I going to put those out there?
I mean, we obviously have a direct sales team that's going out and selling those things, and we're thinking about the ad layouts and what units go on which pages and what the configuration is. There's always a trick of like, can I add an extra ad to the page to like boost things when we need it? And like, let's do that at the right time of year. Let's get all of our partners in, everything from editorial, audience development, product and technology aligned around, you don't need an extra ad on the page all year, you need it in Q4 or during Fashion Week where it's actually gonna make a difference. And if we do it, what's the point of diminishing return? I think that there are sometimes assumptions that like advertising is just gonna ask for the most. As an ad ops person, I'm not always asking for the most, I'm asking for just enough, I think, but I think being able to show that, if we do that, engagement stays, constant, that we're not harming the user experience. A lot of these tests we've done so far show that it's sort of inconclusive by being additive. So I think we have to protect the premiumness of what we do, but also know what levers we have to pull, be it direct or indirect, and what the value of all of that in our sort of holistically looks like.
Yeah. And to your point, Rachel, I feel like I know that conversation with product editorial about saying, what about adding a placement here and ad? I don't like those conversations. They see me coming, they're like, oh no. And so it's every once in a while, it's nice, rarely, but then sometimes we'll be able to say, here's a placement that's really, really low viewability. Let's actually remove that. And I'll be like, surprise, we're gonna actually get rid of this. You probably didn't expect that. But this is a good thing, because this is the way, we're going to future-proof our business that way. And I think like you said, the trade-offs where it's going to be a little bit of a revenue hit, but it's going to put you in a better position long-term. So you have to kind of incrementally do changes like that.
I love those conversations internally. I'm just like, I'm okay with doing something like that, but let's go into this knowing what we anticipate the outcome being, how we're going to measure it, how we're going to talk about it, and how it serves ultimately whatever business we're hoping to achieve.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great feeling when you're like, I'm being so magnanimous, I want to make it look so much better. Let's get rid of that below the fold 728
5%.
that has 4%
You're
viewability
welcome.
dragging down your full score. So yeah.
You're welcome.
Oh God, I love those conversations.
I'm glad. You can see how my panel's just loving everything here. Everybody in the audience is like, oh no, I don't want to have that, but they're excited.
You're welcome is sort of a good ad ops phrase, right? Like, you're welcome.
Yeah.
We've figured it out. You're welcome.
So finally on this little topic, there's so many solutions out there that help you try to make these, decisions and make these yield decisions. So in a perfect world, how do you think solutions like this can evolve to help you make those decisions for the publisher and then, help you with your yield effort? So Gregg, I'm throwing it to you.
Okay. So again, I'm not a shill here for Adomik, but it has definitely improved things. I think like everything should go a further step, and marrying these data still remains difficult when you're like, hey, we have this great direct buy that maybe we're taking a hit in open auction and like we're only slightly flat versus time period, but it's like for the larger conversation. And marrying those conversations and that data from the direct side of the house, but also like being able to then upsell people and be like, hey, we're actually, which we're constantly doing with our data and like our pricing rules is like, hey, Q4, I mean, we're not unique here again, but like Q4 CPMs go up. Like, let's try to push people up the ladder, and the rate card does have to move. We have to have these conversations. It's a dynamic conversation. Like, another thing we're not as good as we could be is dealing with data transfer files, and like we just started our kickoff call with Ads Data Hub through Google. So like there are just all these solutions, but it's like at the end of the day, like, do we have too many pricing rules? Are we stepping on each other? Like, so sifting through all the noise to get to the signal will always remain a problem, and I guess will always like keep us employed. So that's good too. But it remains difficult, but I think things are getting better, and I think Adomik definitely helps us in our day-to-day for sure.
Jake, how about you?
No, I mean, I agree with all that. I think, you mentioned price floors. I think that's one area of the industry that can evolve or continue to evolve. I know there was some discussion, I think, yesterday about, I guess there's a whole panel about price floors. And we're still not there. I think there's a lot to be done. Over the years, it had, from an ad server level, there really hadn't been price floors available. Then it was static, now it's dynamic. There still isn't a way to set a hard floor on the dynamic CPMs in Google Ad Manager, so I think that's still an area of opportunity. But I think more beyond that, it's, we're looking at what one partner on the real-time data module side to do some kind of dynamic flooring, similar to what others are exploring. But not just to say let's adjust existing floors, but let's set new floors. Let's set pricing for new floors. But I think that finding new floors, the discovery of those new pricing opportunities, and the setting and maintaining of them is a huge opportunity. And there's a little bit of testing. There's a partner called Optimera who we're exploring some kind of test with that on the real-time data module side. But I think that's the kind of thing where system platforms like that can be extended further to really give publishers more power to better monetize their inventory.
There's two things as you guys were talking about this. One is just the keeping up with everything, and I will say that at Condé we have a huge sales team selling print, events, everything. My programmatic team in comparison is fairly small, so we're able to keep all the data sources. I think as we've globalized and added complexity and our products change, just keeping up with it from an infrastructure perspective is, a work and something that I think we're going to need to keep doing. The beauty of it, and I think it's really paid off in the last year or two, I love going to my direct sales team and saying, I could do nothing and do this. Meaning, I don't want your deal, I'm not going to negotiate that low. This is what we're going to earn in programmatic, and I could just do nothing and we'll be okay. But our ability to teach them about that and sort of show them yield dynamics by brand, by seasonality, it's really powerful. It changes the way that they think about digital deals overall, and so I think that cycle has sort of helped us reinvest in that infrastructure and get everybody sort of on board with these are the things we need to do to drive those outcomes. So I just want to keep doing more.
Yeah, and I think, forgetting the gentleman's name during the breakout session for pricing floors yesterday, but he basically had data saying the higher we set the floors, we're not actually increasing the ad quality. Sometimes it's the bad actors working harder to get through. And we've seen that occasionally with if a competitive dating app wants to get through and they can miscategorize themselves, they can get through if they're going to spend $60 CPM, right? So we can sit with all this data all the time and have all these great reporting solutions, but we still need to be able to have a qualitative conversation about hey, we got a $60 CPM there, but that is a terrible ad. But with billions of ads, how much can you do?
Yeah, and I also thought, Rachael, to your point about your team being fully equipped and capable and educated. We'll have conversations with our direct sales team as well, and they're incredible and they're really, really, capable, and they've become really, really well versed in programmatic because of conversations we've had where we say, if we lose a direct deal, it's not because it's going to go direct to another publisher. It's going to go programmatic to maybe to us or somewhere else. But that's the way the market is shifting. So we need to be well versed in that, be equipped to speak to that, and move and show how we can facilitate those pipes, because that's where that's the trend. As we know.
Okay. So now we want to move on to our favorite topic, cookies. They're going away. It's the apocalypse. What are we going to do? So now we know people are starting to leverage first-party data. In the past, you were looking at first-party data, you're looking at a direct deal, a programmatic direct, a PG. But now, with this new world that we're coming into, we're going to have to be looking at that for your open auction deals as well. And so, how are you going to manage that? What is your plan? How are you going to use audience data, to look at an open auction? And also, how are we going to use that data to differentiate your open auction for your PMP in this new world that's, started, that we're living in right now? So, Jake, how about you?
Kick it off. Yeah, it's something I won't opine on this too much, but I think, I'll think about breaking it. It's kind of like an easy way to think about it for myself. I'll break it down to authenticated and non-authenticated audiences, and think about for the authenticated audiences where you have solutions like LiveRamp or the Amazon Publisher audiences or the Trade Desk UID 2.0, ways that you can make use of those solutions, and we're exploring each of those in terms of being able to better monetize our logged in audiences, which is important, and also kind of deepening that relationship. But on the other side, you have the non-authenticated audiences, which is a bigger pool, I think, for pretty much everyone. And that is something that is really important to focus on. I think sometimes the focus, the importance of that gets lost in all the discussion of these deterministic audiences that are really valuable, but of a much, much smaller scale. And so I support the seller-defined audiences framework. We're moving in that direction to set that up. And I think Steph Laser, who is probably familiar with some folks here, who is a News Corp on Amazon now, has had a great piece in Ad Exchanger a while back about seller-defined audiences and the benefits of it. And there was a piece, I think, last week, another one about from an optical person, I think, about seller-defined audiences. But the idea, I think, we support that because it is a publisher defining the audience. I think when you talk about audience definition, that is so critical in this phase and the coming phase, especially as Chrome deprecates third-party cookies. And I think the most qualified party, I'm probably biased because I'm a publisher, but the most qualified party to define an audience, to understand the audience, to know it, to define it, to break it into segments, is the publisher, is the owner and operator of a given website. And that's what seller-defined audiences embraces, as compared to some of the other proposals that are more based around a browser defining an audience, which I think those things will have to coexist. You know, it's not that that is not going to be good for certain audiences. It's not going to be performative. It certainly will, but there, I think, should certainly be a space for SDA, and it's something that I think buyers will find a lot of benefit from because of the way those audiences are organized. So we're you know in favor of that.
Rachel, how about you?
Yes. Everything he just said. I just can't kind of go back to the Condé portfolio, and I know it's a sort of dorky thing to say, but like we have brands like Bon Appetit that are about food, and you could talk about it being about food, and that's first party data, right? And we've been doing this for a long time. I do think that there's layers of complexity on top of that where we're talking about, has somebody subscribed? So are we passing some kind of identifier through in a compliant way? Are we seeing any reward from that? How do we define that audience, from just a sort of contextual or first party perspective? We're looking at all of those things. But I sort of feel like there's been concern that like advertising's going away. And I don't see that. Like Rob's like, no, it's not. But there's just sort of a perception of like cookies are going away. This whole thing is going to change. I think we're going to keep doing what we're doing, and it's a matter of understanding that sort of pyramid of logged in users to other ways to reach those readers and make those available where it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in full agreement here. I would say that I think that if anything, IDFA going away and, well, for some people going away, I think 20% of people are opting into ads at this point or being tracked. It's helped us push up the funnel, to direct, because we sit on this treasure trove of first party data. If you measured our age and gender against any list, it's like, asymptotically approaching 100%. Like people say that people lie on dating apps, but like, I never understood dudes who lie about their height. Like eventually you have to show up to the date, right? But it turns out that, it's like I'm 5'11", I'm like 5'2". We're just gonna sit down the whole date? Sorry.
That's a good audience segment though, right? Like dudes who lie in their dating.
Yeah, we can break that out if that's what you need.
Gregg just made a new app.
No, it's been helpful to us. And then as far as third-party data segments, I mean, something's always going to exist. Although, to be fair, like some of those lists are crap too. Like, I'm sure at some point everybody in this room has been an auto intender, and some of you don't have your license. So like, not so great. So I don't know how it's going to flesh out. To be honest, we're being very cautious about what solution we're going to come up with. And I think for the time being, people are still addicted to cookies. People are still addicted to IDFA. We have buyers that just won't buy us anymore because like we're not passing IDFA. So you deal with it and you adjust. And like I just don't think we're going to get the bleeding edge of it right now. We're just going to wait and see what shakes out first. I feel bad for people who like really started moving on a lot of these audience, audience stuff, and then like by the way, Google's not getting rid of it until 23, and we did all this work in 20, right? So I think it's the cautious approach is probably best. Not to say you shouldn't be testing if you have the ability to test.
Totally agree with that. I think I think we've all probably seen this. The buy side is pretty slow to move on this. So if you move really quickly and set up all of the frameworks for something that's actually not going to get adopted or is going to change completely, I think there isn't a great reason to really rush into setting everything up right now while still shaking out on how the budgets will flow. So good to do the research and be aware, but not have done all the investment and invest in something that's not actually going to make sense.
Okay. And finally, because I know we're getting close to the end, I wouldn't save time for questions. Last question, and your thoughts on, you talked a little bit about first-party data, but I know publishers are also using third-party market data to make decisions on what brands are buying on the market, how does my open compare to other people, and how are you using this third-party data, and what sources are you using to help your yield and move your revenue forward? Gregg, I'm going to start with you. I'm just going to go down the line.
Well, obviously I reached out to other publishers that were similar to see, like, you tend to not, like, when things are going real well, you tend to, like, not check how you're doing versus other publishers. When things are bad, you're like, all right, we know things are bad, we gotta sell to upper management, like, are we, like, slightly more valuable than the average publisher and our yield team, right?
Must be the market.
Yeah, it's market fluctuations, obviously. We have no control. But I think actually Adomik has a good tool too, which is called benchmarks, so we know, like, hey, this is how native is doing in Q1. Here's how we measure up again. Here's our CPMs versus the market. There are other solutions and stuff, but I think it's just things like this are great because you get to talk to other publishers and be like, hey, we're getting hammered in this area, or this is working really well for us. So, like, thank God we're all in person again. That's all. That's pretty great.
Yes, totally agree with that, and we'll do that, and not to, genuinely, and we support that same insight and benchmarking on the same side from Adomik. And to add to that, I think some of the other tools people use, Seller Crowd, Media Radar, et cetera, but on the Amazon platform too, we found that Shopping Insights has been interesting, where we can find e-commerce audiences where it's hard for us, we find those audiences at surprising scale, and it's hard to use a lens to find those audiences aside from platforms like that. So that's been one interesting use case to help find audiences that we don't normally see indexing very highly.
Same. I think the CPMs and how do we compare to cohort is always helpful in times of need. But I also think that just the conversation with your sellers on prospecting, the more information we can give them, the better. So all of those things.
Okay, well, I want to open it up for some questions, and then right at the end, I'm going to call my CEO up, Nico, and he's going to have a little announcement on Adomik.
I'm Courtney Killen from Cox Media Group. And so my question is really going back to the user experience and how Programmatic can kind of navigate those conversations within your internal teams. So for example, your direct sales team has an advertiser that wants a very particular sponsorship that might require a new ad placement, or in our case, we're talking about a persistent video player coming across our entire site and running on every page. How do we steer programmatic into those conversations? How can it drive those conversations?
I look at frankly, I don't get that many bad ads in programmatic anymore. I don't know. Like back in the day, I don't know, just back in the day, it used to be a little bit more of a problem, but I can't say that I'm getting hit up with like, hey, there's a, crappy cat food ad, and what are you gonna do about it? And so I think that it's a little bit of reminding people that the programmatic can be premium. And if you see a bad ad, tell me. But for the most part, we keep a pretty good user experience, and just try to balance that out. I honestly wouldn't make a site recommendation knowing that it was going to be bad. But I think it's a little bit of education, at least for our product teams, to understand that like programmatic is part of what we do. Don't think of it as something separate.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think, as I said before, for us it'll be, the user experience is first and foremost, and if there's something that kind of qualitatively could jeopardize that, could mess with it, I think it's not a non-starter. But then assuming this is something that could be UX positive or UX neutral, I think we would want to look, because we've thought about something like that too, the sticky video player, and I know that's something that's recommended to boost viewability, to help with CTR. I think a lot of major players will recommend sticky video placements, and not to take one stance or the other, but I think we would look at something like that and want to say, let's test this in some kind of narrow environment, on some level of production maybe, but a slice of it where we can get a good sample size and see what the impact is. Anything that we can measure in the UX realm, I think along the lines of session depth, impressions per page view, time on site, all those things to say, is there a measurable impact to the things that we can put in the UX category that would show it's a downturn or an improvement or neutral. And then if it's neutral, then we say, okay, maybe is there other revenue metrics, the CPM side, the RPM side, that we can say, okay, this makes it a positive experiment. It's worth it.
Yeah, I would also say that, like, I hope that client is an evergreen client, but like, it just comes down to math, and it's like, okay, we'll just make this one client, we put that video player up, and then we're gonna get rid of it, they never come back for whatever reason, budgets dry out, recession coming, yada yada. Like, I would say that like, deep categorical and URL block list are your friend when you're testing anything, because you'll find out pretty quickly if like, okay, this is the kind of advertisements we're comfortable with. And then if that money just doesn't make sense, then you just walk at the end of the day. But like, again, to Bruce's point, like there isn't that much tremendously bad ads happening anymore, at least on our end. I
great conversation, guys. Quick question around teams, like who on your teams are pulling the levers for Adomik or anything, and any other dashboards that you're using, like, you know, size of teams, types of roles, and maybe even talk a little bit about hiring and finding new people. You know, and like in 10 words or less. No, pick your choices out of that, because I want to make sure we have time.
We have a relatively small programmatic team, 5, Condé. I'm trying to keep it tight so that we have one solution and one path forward. We work with an internal BI team to do the warehousing and presentation, try to keep revenue analytics within revenue and not spread everywhere for interpretation.
Yeah, that's actually good to know. We have 5 on our team, so it's great. It's good to know. But no, we have one point person kind of who handles the platform maintenance and such. But then we'll also do or setting up these kind of stakeholder meetings where we'll have seats that will go to each of our GMs of our verticals, and then some executive people where we'll do training. We'll be doing training sessions with each of them to say, here's your dashboard. We'll customize it as you like. And then kind of leave it in their hands, but it'll always go through the programmatic team.
Not to show off, but we're only 4. But no, I mean, yeah, you can tell. We have deal health reports coming out every week. Obviously, it's mostly at this point we're inventory constrained in some places, so like we constantly need to share like, hey, this is what we're getting in open right now, so like please stop undercutting, because holistically we're now losing money. It's not just like open's gonna kill us because of bad ads or anything. It's like, guys, we're actually halfway decent at what we're doing. So like, please push back on the clients and say like, at least move your CPMs in Q4. So yeah, I mean that's our team. They're actually all here. I'm not gonna ask them to take a bow or anything.
So what percentage more effective than the other two? I work out that before that time. Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah, so I'd like to introduce my CEO, Nicholas, and Todd from Media Radar, and they're going to make a quick announcement.
Hi everybody. Sorry for the voice. So we are here to announce a great partnership with Todd, and I promise I didn't make Todd an offer I couldn't refuse. It's a genuine partnership we are announcing today, and maybe you want to introduce Media Radar quickly, although everybody knows.
As part of this partnership, I have agreed to learn French. I speak Spanish, but French is the new thing. Media Radar is a company that has about 2,400 current clients that are mostly used by the ad sales teams. And we have a partnership we've been striking up over the last almost a full year now.
Yeah, so thanks to the partnership, we will empower the programmatic sales team that on a weekly basis are using the programmatic leads, highlighting PMP and PG opportunities. And we will empower those leads with Media Radar data so that the sales team will have access directly to the contacts to reach out to grab those budgets that were not accessible before. And we'll provide data to Media Radar in order
to improve spend levels so we get a more accurate view of what's really happening, and also informing CPM levels down to the ad unit level. And mostly, I think one of the things that really came up out of our friendship over the last year was learning that we had a lot of shared clients and the same part of the organization, and that if we pulled the data sets together, that would be a lot better for the marketplace. So that will come out over the next few weeks and months. There'll be more to see, but thank you. We're excited to have you guys use this new stuff.
Thank you.
I like a good announcement, right? That's kind of cool. All right, so I think we're kind of at time, and it's time for a break. Go downstairs, get some caffeine, take a moment. But fantastic job, panel. I got to be honest, I didn't come up with a lot of questions. You like holistically did. So let's thank our panel, please.